My name is Elias Thorne. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my life, I've found a quiet comfort in things that are solid, things that are built to last. I'm an architectural designer here in Port Blossom, a city of steel bridges and perpetual rain, where the evergreen hills press in on all sides, reminding you that nature is always just a breath away. My work is my sanctuary. I draw lines that become homes. I shape spaces where people will live their lives, and I believe in the integrity of a good foundation. It's a belief that extends beyond my blueprints. I've always thought that relationships, like buildings, need a solid, honest-to-God foundation to withstand any storm. For the past year, I had been building what I thought was a beautiful structure with Clara. She was like a sudden burst of wildflowers in my carefully ordered garden, vibrant, a little chaotic, and possessing a laugh that could make the ever-present gray skies of Port Blossom feel like a minor inconvenience. We met at a farmer's market, both reaching for the last carton of Marionberries. Her smile was disarming, her energy infectious. She worked in marketing for a tech startup, a world of fast-paced change and ephemeral trends that was entirely foreign to my own. But we found a rhythm. Our weekends were spent exploring the Columbia River Gorge, our evenings in quiet companionship at my apartment, the scent of cedar from my workshop mingling with the aroma of the tea she loved. I was in love with her, with the life we were sketching out together. I knew about her friends, of course. She spoke of them with a kind of reverential awe. They called themselves the Constellation, a tight-knit group of 5 women who had navigated their 20s together. I'd met them in passing at a birthday party or a crowded bar, but never for any real length of time. Clara always seemed to keep our worlds a little separate, and in my naivety, I thought she was just protecting the quiet space we had built. Then came the invitation. "They want to properly meet you," she'd said, her eyes bright with an excitement I didn't quite share. "Isabel is hosting a get-together at the Gilded Grape on Friday. Just a small, intimate thing. They're dying to get to know the man who's stolen all my time." A knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach, a feeling I couldn't quite name. "Just your friends?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Well, yes. It's their monthly thing, but they're making an exception for you." She kissed my cheek, oblivious to my hesitation. "It'll be fun, Eli. I promise." And because I loved her, and because I believed in the importance of embracing the people in her life, I agreed. I see now that I was walking onto a site where the foundation was already cracked, where the ground had been salted, and nothing good was ever meant to grow. Friday arrived with a persistent drizzle that cast a pearlescent sheen over the city's streets. The Gilded Grape was one of those places that tried very hard to feel like old-world Europe, but ended up feeling like a caricature. The walls were a deep burgundy, the lighting was oppressively dim, and a somber jazz trio played in the corner, their music a little too loud for genuine conversation. They were already there, clustered around a small table in an alcove, a half-empty bottle of Pinot Noir standing like a sentinel in their midst. 5 of them, plus Clara, who waved me over with a brilliant smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I felt a sudden, sharp awareness of being the only man, the outsider stepping into a sealed environment. "Elias, finally," Clara said, making room for me on the velvet banquette beside her. "Everyone, this is Elias." The 5 women of the Constellation turned their collective gaze upon me, and it felt less like a greeting and more like an assessment. Isabel, the unspoken leader, offered a smile that was all teeth. She was a wellness brand strategist, a title as polished and vague as her personality. "So, you're the famous Elias," she began, her voice smooth as polished stone. "Clara has told us so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I said, attempting a lightheartedness I didn't feel. "Well, she told us you're an architectural designer," said Margot, a gallery curator with a severe haircut and an expression of faint disdain. She looked at my simple gray wool sweater and dark-washed jeans as if they were a personal affront. "How tangible." "I enjoy it," I replied simply. "Building things that last." "Unlike most relationships in the city," chimed in Genevieve, a corporate lawyer whose sharp eyes seemed to be cross-examining my very soul. "The turnover is brutal." Clara laughed, a little too loudly. "Oh, Jen, don't scare him off already." She squeezed my hand, but it felt less like a gesture of affection and more like an anchor holding me in place. The other two were Noelle, a yoga instructor who spoke in a breathy, serene tone about auras and energetic alignment, and Lena, who worked for a nonprofit and offered me the only genuinely warm, if slightly nervous, smile of the group. The questions began as a slow, steady barrage, each one couched in seeming innocence but carrying a weighted subtext. Clara mentioned you don't have a social media presence, Elias, Noelle said, tilting her head. How do you stay connected to the world? It's so important to curate your personal brand. I suppose my work is my brand, I said. And I connect with people in person. Or on the phone. Isabel let out a small, tinkling laugh. How delightfully old-fashioned. Like a rotary phone. But don't you worry about becoming irrelevant. I'm more concerned with being authentic than being relevant, I said, the words feeling clumsy as they left my mouth. Authenticity is a brand, darling, Margot corrected smoothly. And a very profitable one if marketed correctly. They moved on to my life, my history, my ambitions. It wasn't a conversation, it was an interrogation disguised as cocktail chatter. Every answer I gave was taken, examined, and found wanting. I talked about my love for hiking, for losing myself in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. All that mud, Margot murmured, sipping her wine. Clara's ex, Julian, was more of a five-star hotel in Bali kind of traveler. He understood that comfort is a form of self-respect. Clara said nothing. She just swirled the wine in her glass, her gaze fixed on the crimson liquid. I felt a prickle of unease turn into a slow, burning discomfort. I was being compared, measured against a phantom standard I couldn't possibly meet. The conversation felt like a performance, and I was the unwitting, unrehearsed lead. They spoke in a shorthand of inside jokes and shared memories, pausing occasionally to throw me a question like a bone, only to snatch it back before I could properly answer. The subject turned to our relationship. So, it's been about a year now, Genevieve stated, her lawyerly precision making it sound like an exhibit in a trial. That's a critical milestone. It's usually around now that the initial gloss wears off and you see the real foundation. Or lack thereof. She looked pointedly at Clara. Guys, stop, Clara said, but her protest was weak, a leaflet in a hurricane. We're just being thorough, Isabel said, placing a perfectly manicured hand on Clara's arm. We have to be. We remember what happened with Ben. He seemed perfect for a year, too, until we realized his 5-year plan didn't even include a mortgage. They all looked at me expectant. The jazz trio swung into a mournful saxophone solo that seemed to mock the tension at our table. So, Elias, Genevieve said, leaning forward. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I glanced at Clara, hoping for a lifeline, a shared look, anything. She was studiously avoiding my gaze. I took a breath. Professionally, I hope to be leading my own team at the firm. Maybe starting to work on projects that have a real community impact. Personally, I looked at Clara again. Personally, I see myself with Clara. Building a life together. Maybe thinking about a home, a real one that we design ourselves. There was a beat of silence. Maybe? Margot repeated, her eyebrows arching. After a year, a man should know. He shouldn't be thinking about it. He should have a plan. Julian had a 10-year plan. It was very detailed. Julian was also emotionally unavailable and cheated on me, Clara muttered into her wine glass, just loud enough for me to hear. But he had ambition, darling, Isabel countered smoothly. Passion. It's the intention that matters. The final, unbearable turn came when they started discussing finances. It was done with a grotesque, faint subtlety. They talked about Isabel's recent investment in a wellness retreat in Arizona, Margot's acquisition of a piece by an up-and-coming artist that cost more than a sensible car, and Genevieve's bonus. Then Isabel turned to me. It must be so rewarding, Elias, to work with your hands. So grounded. I imagine the pay in a field like architecture is quite stable, isn't it? Predictable. The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I was stable. I was predictable. I was not Julian in Bali or an expensive piece of art. I was a sensible car. I was the safe, boring choice. And all the while, Clara, my Clara, the woman I loved, sat beside me and let it happen. She offered no defense. No, that's not fair. No, he's a wonderful man, and I love him. She just sat there, a silent, smiling accomplice to my slow, methodical dissection. A cold clarity washed over me, cutting through the haze of hurt and confusion. I stood up, the movement jarring in the carefully constructed tableau. I need some fresh air, I said, my voice calmer than I felt. 6 pairs of eyes snapped to me. Oh, did we touch a nerve? Margot asked, a sly smile playing on her lips. Clara finally looked at me, her expression a mixture of annoyance and embarrassment. Eli, sit down. Don't be so dramatic. They're just teasing you, Elias, Isabel added, her voice dripping with condescension. If you're going to be with Clara, you have to be able to handle a little bit of playful scrutiny. I looked at Clara, my heart feeling like a heavy, cold stone in my chest. Are you coming with me? She rolled her eyes, a gesture of pure dismissal that hurt more than any of the barbs from her friends. Honestly, Elias, they're my best friends. If you don't connect with them, that feels like a you problem. The jazz trio fell silent. The air at the table crackled. In that moment, her words didn't just create a crack in our foundation, they detonated it. She had shown me, with chilling certainty, where her loyalties lay. Not with me, not with us, but with the court of critics who held her in their thrall. I looked at her, at all of them, their faces a gallery of smug expectation. You're right, I said, my voice even. It is my problem. I took out my wallet, placed $40 on the table, more than enough for the 2 glasses of iced tea I'd nursed all evening, and turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I felt their eyes on me, but I kept walking, past the bar, past the host stand, and out into the cleansing, indifferent rain of Port Blossom. Clara didn't follow. The walk home was a blur of slick streets and the neon glow of storefronts bleeding into puddles. The rain felt fitting, a physical manifestation of the cold sorrow that was seeping into my bones. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a profound and hollow sadness. I had been so proud of the structure we were building, Clara and I. But I saw now that I was the only one on the construction site. She was just visiting, bringing her inspectors to point out all the flaws. My apartment, usually a haven of warmth and order, felt cavernous and empty. The scent of her perfume lingered faintly in the air, a ghost of the intimacy I thought we shared. I sat in the dark for what felt like hours, replaying the evening, the casual cruelty, the calculated dismissals. But the scene that played on a relentless loop was Clara's face, her look of exasperation as she sided with them. If you don't connect with them, that feels like a you problem. My phone finally buzzed 2 hours later. It was Clara. That was incredibly rude and embarrassing. You made me look foolish. I stared at the text, the sheer audacity of it taking my breath away. I typed back, my fingers moving with a newfound steadiness. I made you look foolish? Clara, they spent 3 hours systematically disrespecting me, and you didn't say a single word. Her reply was instantaneous. They were testing you. They're protective of me. It's how they show they care. I can't believe you're this sensitive. It wasn't a test. It was a tribunal. And you were one of the judges. You're being dramatic, she wrote. Get some sleep. We'll talk about this when you've calmed down. But I wasn't going to calm down. I wasn't going to sleep it off and pretend it hadn't happened. Her words, "It feels like a you problem," echoed in my mind. She was right. This was my problem to solve. And solving it meant I needed to understand the full scope of it. Not just the symptoms I'd witnessed tonight, but the disease itself. My architectural work has taught me that you can't fix a problem until you understand its structure. So I turned on my lamp, opened my laptop, and began to draw up the blueprints of the constellation. I started with Isabel, the wellness guru. Her professional website was a pastel-hued monument to curated vulnerability. It was filled with blog posts titled "Living Your Truth" and "The Courage of Authenticity." She sold online courses on radical self-love for $500 a session. But a quick search of public business filings showed her company, Be Well Collective, was barely solvent. More interesting was her social media, where she'd tagged Clara and me in a photo from the bar earlier that night. The caption read, "Initiating at Elias.T into the circle." Let's see if he measures up. Winking face, the public declaration of their test, the winking emoji, it was all there. Then Margot, the art curator. Her gallery's blog was an exercise in elitism, with posts decrying the commercialization of art while simultaneously promoting pieces with astronomical price tags. I remembered her comment about my sensible clothes. Digging a little deeper into her tagged photos, I found a picture of her from a few years back at a party, wearing a dress from a well-known fast fashion brand. A friend had commented, "Love the dress. Is that from H&M?" Margot's reply was sharp. "It's vintage, actually." A small lie, but it spoke volumes. It wasn't about the art, it was about the performance of status. My search wasn't born of malice. It was a search for truth, for the kind of solid, verifiable facts that I work with every day. I was trying to understand the disconnect between the women they presented themselves as and the cruelty I had experienced. The real discovery came with Noelle, the yoga instructor. Her current online presence was a sea of Sanskrit and photos of her in impossible poses on sun-drenched beaches. Her mantra was about non-judgment and finding your inner peace. But the internet has a long memory. Using an archive tool, I found remnants of an older, deleted blog she'd kept in her early 20s. It was called City Girl Confessions. The posts were a startling chronicle of petty grievances, jealousies, and a shockingly cynical view of relationships. One post, titled "Why His Friends Are Your Competition," detailed how to subtly undermine a new girlfriend in your friend group. Another, chillingly, was about a falling out with an old friend. Sometimes, she'd written, "You have to burn a bridge to light your own way." This wasn't a quest for revenge. It was a confirmation. The foundation was rotten through and through. The kindness was a facade, the support was conditional, and the loyalty was a weapon. They weren't protecting Clara. They were isolating her inside a fortress of their own making, ensuring no one could get through who didn't pledge allegiance to them first. I compiled it all, not into a dossier for an attack, but into a private file for my own clarity. Screenshots, links, public records. I was an architect examining a condemned building, tracing the cracks, identifying the faulty wiring, and the crumbling supports. The work was methodical, quiet, and deeply sorrowful. By the time the first light of dawn began to filter through my window, I understood. The problem wasn't that I wasn't good enough for them. The problem was that their world was built on a foundation of insecurity, hypocrisy, and fear, and I wanted no part of it. I had my answer. And I knew what I had to do to solve my problem. Clara arrived at my apartment on Saturday afternoon. She used her key without knocking, a habit I once found endearing that now felt like an invasion. She found me in my workshop. The scent of fresh-cut maple would thicken the air. I was sanding a tabletop, the rhythmic motion a balm to my frayed nerves. "We need to talk about Thursday night," she said, her arms crossed. She was wearing what I called her battle dress, a sharp, black outfit that she wore when she needed to feel powerful. I didn't stop sanding. "Okay, let's talk. My friends think you're oversensitive and, frankly, a bit arrogant for walking out like that." I paused, setting the sandpaper down. I turned to face her. "And what do you think, Clara?" I think you could have handled it better. You made things awkward for me. They compared me to your ex-boyfriend. They mocked my career. They insinuated I wasn't ambitious or wealthy enough for you. How exactly should I have handled that? By being charming. By laughing it off. By showing them you're confident enough not to be bothered by a few jokes. "They weren't jokes," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "It was a character assassination, and you were a spectator. A silent one." Her face hardened. "You don't get it. They've been my rock. They got me through my divorce. They helped me start my career. Their opinion matters to me. More than mine." I asked. "More than my dignity?" "This isn't about you, Elias. It's about me feeling safe. They're making sure you're right for me. By trying to drive me away?" The absurdity of it was staggering. "Clara, a partnership is a structure built for two. It's supposed to be a shelter. You invited 5 demolition experts into ours and handed them sledgehammers. God, you're so dramatic with your building metaphors," she snapped, her voice rising. "Maybe you're just not strong enough to be with a woman who has a strong circle of friends." There it was. The final verdict, delivered without a hint of irony. My strength was being questioned because I refused to tolerate disrespect. A profound sense of peace settled over me, the kind that comes with absolute certainty. The debate was over. The plans were irrevocably altered. Maybe you're right, I said softly. Maybe I'm not. The fight went out of her, replaced by a flicker of panic. What does that mean? It means this is my problem, I said, echoing my words from the restaurant. And I'm solving it. She left in a storm of confused anger, slamming the door behind her. A few hours later, a post appeared on her social media, a picture of the constellation, glasses raised, with the caption, "Some people can't handle the light of a strong sisterhood." It was time to turn on the lights for them, too. I didn't create a public spectacle. That wasn't my way. My solution was quieter, more direct, more in line with the principles I held dear: clarity, honesty, and structure. I spent the rest of the weekend creating a simple, password-protected webpage. It was clean, minimalist, designed like an architectural portfolio. The title was simple: A Question of Foundation. On Monday morning, I sent a single email with the link and password. The recipients were Isabel, Margot, Genevieve, Noelle, Lena, and Clara. The page was divided into 5 sections, one for each of them except Lena. Under Isabel, on authenticity, I placed a screenshot of her Live Your Truth blog post next to a screenshot of her public Venmo feed, which showed a pattern of her borrowing small, then larger, sums of money from Clara for business expenses, followed by Instagram pictures of her on a lavish vacation in Tulum that same week. I added her post from the wine bar about seeing if I measure up. Under Margot, on integrity, I placed a screenshot of her blog post about the importance of artistic provenance next to the archived picture of her in the fast fashion dress and her lie about it being vintage. I also added a public record showing a small claims court filing against her gallery from an artist who alleged she'd sold his work on consignment and never paid him his share. Under Genevieve, on scrutiny, I simply posted a link to her firm's ethics page, which had a clause about maintaining professional integrity in one's personal life. Beside it, I placed a screenshot of a scathing public review of her legal services from a former client's ex-husband, accusing her of encouraging his wife to lie under oath during their divorce proceedings. For Noelle, the section was titled On Non-Judgment. It contained screenshots from her deleted City Girl Confessions blog. The post about undermining a friend's new partner, the one about burning bridges. But the final piece was the most damning. I had found a post where she wrote gleefully about a fling she'd had with her yoga student's boyfriend. He said they were on a break, she'd written. But a break is just an open door if you're brave enough to walk through it. #Namaste. The final section was titled For Clara. It didn't contain any exposes. It was just a single, short paragraph. A foundation is built on trust and mutual respect. A home is a place of safety and support. On Thursday night, you showed me that our construction site was, in fact, a courtroom, and you had already sided with the prosecution. I wish you well, but I cannot build a life on such unstable ground. This is me solving my problem. Goodbye, Elias. I hit send. Then I blocked all 6 of their numbers, logged out of my email, and went to my workshop. I put on my headphones, turned on the quiet, meditative music I listen to when I work, and picked up a piece of walnut wood. And for the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace. I had stated my truth, presented the facts without malice or exaggeration, and drawn a clear, uncrossable boundary. I had closed the door on a structure that was not sound, not safe, and not home. The fallout was not loud and explosive, at least not in my world. It was a distant tremor, felt through a single, unexpected aftershock. 2 days later, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. It was from Lena, the quiet one from the nonprofit. Elias, it began, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I feel I have to say something. First, I want to apologize for my silence on Thursday. I was uncomfortable with how they were treating you, and I'm ashamed I didn't speak up. It's a pattern I'm only now realizing I need to break. Second, thank you. What you did was not an attack, it was a mirror. You showed everyone the face they present to the world, and then you showed them the one they hide. The constellation is, well, it's fallen. Isabel and Clara are fighting about the money. Margot is furious at everyone for reasons I don't fully understand. And Genevieve and Noel, the man Noel wrote about in her old blog, that was Genevieve's fiancé from years ago, during a time they were having trouble. Genevieve never knew. She knows now. It's all a terrible, ugly mess. But it's a truthful mess. You didn't create it, you just revealed it. I hope you find the peace you deserve. You seem like a genuinely good man. Don't let this experience change that. Sincerely, Lena. I read her email several times. It was a strange, sad sort of validation. I hadn't set out to destroy their friendships, but I had provided the catalyst for a long overdue implosion. Their bond wasn't built on love and support, but on a shared culture of judgment, secrecy, and a mutual agreement to ignore one another's worst impulses. When the light was turned on, the entire structure crumbled. A week later, a letter arrived. It was from Clara, her elegant script instantly recognizable. I left it on my counter for a full day before opening it. It was long, tear-stained in places, a rambling mix of anger, regret, and pleading. She called me cruel, then confessed that everything on the webpage was true. She wrote about the screaming matches, the accusations, the bitter end of friendships she'd thought were ironclad. She said she had been blind, caught up in a dynamic she never had the courage to question. She asked if we could talk, if there was any way to rebuild. I folded the letter carefully. I thought of the feeling in that wine bar, the cold weight of her silence, the casual cruelty in her friend's laughter. I thought of her final, damning words, "That feels like a you problem." Some structures are not meant to be salvaged. Some are condemned for a reason. To try and rebuild on a toxic site would be an act of profound self-betrayal. I didn't write back. My goodbye on the webpage had been clear and final. My silence was the answer. Months have passed. The autumn rain has given way to the deep, quiet cold of a port blossom winter. I see Lena for coffee sometimes. She left the orbit of the constellation completely and seems lighter for it. She told me Isabel's wellness brand collapsed, Margot is facing several lawsuits, Genevieve is on a leave of absence from her firm, and Noel moved away. Clara, she said, deleted all her social media and is trying to piece her life back together alone. I feel a pang of sadness for her, not of regret. I hope she finds her way. I hope she learns to build something for herself on a better foundation. For my part, I am still building. I spend my days drawing homes, and my evenings and weekends in my workshop, my hands covered in sawdust. The work is slow and honest and real. I am learning that the most important structure you can ever build is one of self-respect. It's not built with grand gestures, but with small, daily acts of boundary setting, of choosing integrity over comfort, of having the courage to walk away from a room or a relationship that asks you to be smaller than you are. My life is quieter now, but it is solid. It is my own. And sometimes, when the winter sun breaks through the clouds and fills my workshop with golden light, I run my hand over the smooth, sanded wood of a table I've made, and I know, with a deep and abiding certainty, that I have solved my problem. I have built a space where I can be safe and whole and free.